Welcome to another Sigmalive English Hangout. Today we have with us Mr. Shawn Broderick, the general partner at SOSV Venture Capital Company. Welcome, Shawn. So we'll just start casually here. I know you're involved in business and all that, and you're here for this Cyprus entrepreneurship competition. So what do you think Cyprus can learn about startups, and what do you hope to discuss, at your presentation at the competition?
Sure. So tonight, the goal is to discuss what the different ways that startups can start to really think about ecosystems in a sort of a meta way, for lack of a better word, and talk about the different ways that different ecosystems can help encourage that behavior pattern and what it means to close the loop on that behavior pattern so that it becomes self-sustaining. That's what's important for any startup ecosystem, that it can continue moving along. This weekend, tomorrow and Sunday, we'll be working with 40 or 41 startups, and I'll be doing a sort of boot camp, if you will. I can't run an accelerator in 2 days, but we can run a sort of boot camp, and we'll run through all of the things that we do in an accelerator over 3 months or 4 months time period, with the goal of educating not just the startups, but also the rest of the community that'll be there to sort of feed themselves, right? Teach a man to fish and he can feed himself. And so that's the goal for this weekend. I think that Cyprus, like any other country, any other nation, any other city-state, can learn a ton from other parts of the world in terms of entrepreneurship, and vice versa. As a firm, SOSV is international. We have offices on 3 continents, including China, North America, and Europe. And we take companies from all over the world, from every continent now except Antarctica, I believe. And I don't think we're going to see any startups from Antarctica, but hey, who knows? So we believe entrepreneurship is a global endeavor. And I think it's important for local communities, whether that's at a city level, a state level, or a national level, to pay attention and to be involved and to be helpful as much as they can. But at the end of the day, those entities can't cause success. They can be a catalyst, and they should be a catalyst, but at the end of the day, they're part of the equation, not the whole equation. So there's no such thing as a local company anymore, really. I mean, unless you're delivering laundry or the like, right? Any technology company today is by definition going to be global if it's going to be successful.
And so here we have, we're a small country and, we have a smaller population. So and entrepreneurs, run into sort of difficulties being a small country in the Mediterranean. What do you think, Cyprus can learn from like the U.S. about startups and maybe, how businesses can start?
I think that what, Cyprus has a lot of assets, just like any country, that are distinctive to Cyprus. I think one of the great things about Cyprus personally is its location relative to MENA, Eastern Europe, and Europe as a hub. And I think that that's something that should be exploited. There's no reason why major software companies and hardware companies and bio companies shouldn't be looking at Cyprus, in my opinion, as a great place to have a hub. Never mind, the quality of life seems to be fantastic from the time that I've spent here. I love it here, and they didn't have to ask me twice to come back again. I was like, yeah, I'll be there, whenever. Just tell me the date. I'll be on the plane. And so I think there's a great opportunity there. I don't think that the U.S. has anything in particular to teach Cyprus. I think that the global community has smart things to teach Cyprus and every other country. What those things are, I don't claim to know because I don't know the Cyprus startup community that well. So I wouldn't hazard to guess. But I think that startups are all about learning. By their definition, they're all about learning because there's nothing else you have at the beginning except that desire to be curious.
So you spoke about, a desire to be curious here. What else do you think is really needed to grow a startup business in your own experience?
So I think it's a lot simpler than people make it out to be. Really, it's about the people. It's about the efforts of the people involved. If you're willing to be curious, if you're willing to take some risk, if you're willing to work really hard, and you can find other like-minded people to build around you in terms of an organization, you can accomplish anything. I mean, people say, oh, it won't work here because we don't have enough venture capital, or this won't work here because we don't have enough acquirers, or this won't work here because we don't have the right set of biology labs. And to some extent, those are factors, but they're not reasons why things can't work. And really great entrepreneurs, the best entrepreneurs, will get past all of those problems. Now, that might mean that, you know, if you need a specific type of biolab that doesn't exist in Cyprus, you might have to leave and go somewhere else and do it. Hopefully, when you do that, you don't forget your roots and you bring your company back in some way, fashion, even if it's that international sales office for MENA, Eastern Europe, and Europe. But you know, over time, the ecosystem will feed itself back as those companies move, do what they need to do, and come back after they're successful or when they're not successful. Failure failure happens, and that's a great teacher too.
So, you know, we're talking about building a startup, or you know, we've talked about a little bit about building a startup. What kind of promotion do you think is needed, you know, when you're getting off the ground, and you know, what kind of funds does make it easier to, you know, maybe start moving forward in your idea?
So, I think that the Silicon Valley, idealized Silicon Valley version of the world is a little excessive. We have a television show in the U.S. called Silicon Valley, and it's a joke about, you know, how ridiculous Silicon Valley is. And I personally can't watch it because I live it to some degree, and it's a little too close to home. And you don't need a ton of money. You don't need a ton of equipment. You don't need thousands of people to build a great company. Everything starts with one person usually who has a vision. They pull together a smart team that's willing to work around them. And if they're bright, the first thing they do is worry about customers. You're not going to lock yourself in a room and do science for 10 years or do software for 10 years or do whatever for 10 years. The first thing you're going to do is start talking to customers. And one of the great learnings of the last 5-10 years has been this whole lean startup methodology, which, you know, is a great tool. It's not an end-all be-all. There are places where it doesn't work, but for most companies today in the startup world, it's great because it forces you to really worry about your customer. And if you can get to a point where your customers are willing to buy your product or pay you to create your product, that's the best place to be because revenue is sexy. And there's no better way to get money than to sell your product or pre-sell your product. So Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and other places like that allow you to pre-sell are just fantastic tools for entrepreneurs that didn't exist when I started out. Lean methodology didn't exist, you know, when I started out. We sat around and we built software for 2 years and hoped that, you know, we could figure out how to eat and pay the bills. But that's not really the way it needs to work anymore. In Silicon Valley, you know, in Boston and New York, London, you know, the people want to go raise $5 million and or 5 million pounds or 5 million euros and go do X, Y, Z. And yeah, sometimes that works, but those are usually entrepreneurs that have been there and done that, and they understand that they can bypass a lot of the learning process that most initial entrepreneurs or communities where there aren't a large number of experienced entrepreneurs on whom you can lean are. So I think it just requires smart people and a desire to interact with customers.
Wow. And so you spoke about, you know, Silicon Valley, where we've heard there's a tech bubble and stuff like that. And I've always wondered, you know, do startups get saturated? Does the market get saturated? Is there a chance of it bursting? Can it keep growing as an entity?
So the bubble, today's bubble is weird. So I lived through the bubble of 2000, 2001, 1999. And that bubble was fairly straightforward to understand, at least in retrospect. We now understand what caused it, and we understand why it exploded and so on and so forth. This bubble's weird. Do I think it's a bubble? Yeah, there's some bubble behavior about it. But we've been saying for 2 years now, 3 years, that there's a bubble and it's going to explode. And it hasn't. And I keep telling my portfolio companies, if there's money on the table, take it, because whether it's revenue or investment, because something's going to happen. I don't know what, I don't know when anymore. I've given up trying to guess. The timing of market's really hard, and we've already seen some unicorns fail now, and it hasn't caused the bubble to burst. We'll know soon enough about what the quarter looked like for more unicorns, and I honestly don't know what the story is with this bubble. But in terms of the first part of your question, which was about the saturation issue, I don't think that saturation is generally a big problem in startup markets. I've been in the startup world for about 20 years now, and 25. I'm getting old, and saturation always happens. There's always a lot of copycatting. There's always a lot of people that are trying something else, just like this, but a little bit different, and that's healthy. That's a healthy behavior. The companies in general that are worth saving will get saved and succeed. The companies that are just me too will ultimately usually fail. And then you've got companies that their whole businesses are, how do we create fast me too's, right? And that's a strategy. That's a completely viable strategy that's worked for a few different large firms. So I don't believe in saturation per se. I don't think you can have too many entrepreneurs. I don't think you can have too many startups. The question is whether they can all eat, whether they can all sell product.
And just one last note quickly here. We see the internet's growing and social media and marketing yourself is getting bigger. What do you think this means for startups?
I think that social media is a necessary part of any startup's behavior patterns. So it doesn't matter whether you're selling to the consumer or whether you're selling to other businesses. Social media is critical, and what's even more critical is to pick the right social media platforms that fit your customer base. And if you're in the United States, Instagram is gigantic, and Twitter is gigantic. Obviously, Facebook is gigantic. You're in China, you better be on WeChat. If you're in another country and it has different platforms, you need to be on the right ones. And if you're selling B2B versus B2C, maybe LinkedIn is a better platform for you from a social media perspective than Facebook might be. If you're doing B2C, that might be more appropriate. But the platforms are, deciding on a platform is fairly straightforward. Far more difficult is maintaining a meaningful stream of content that makes people care. Any idiot can put up a Twitter feed or a WeChat account, but it takes a lot of work to make that worth reading, worth paying attention to, worth causing engagement. And so I think it's very important, and I think it's the cheapest way. Certainly I started a game company back in the early 90s, and we didn't have anything like that. We bought paper ads in magazines. I mean, things that are just incomprehensible today, and tracking the behavior pattern of those was really difficult. Today, I know within 30 minutes whether an ad is good or not, whether a message is good or not, whether I'm getting the kind of follow-on that I want from some sort of online behavior. So I think they're fantastic marketing tools, and I don't think they're going to go anywhere soon.
Great. It was really nice to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Nick. Pleasure.